I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye. Watch. I'm sure I'm invisible.
Hi, Drax.
Hey there folks, I'm Mike and this is CMCC Builds. Today we're going to look at an optimized Bugbear build, but before we jump into that, I once again want to thank Undead Achilles for his support. Thank you to all my other patrons, and for everyone else, if you want some cool perks, go ahead and check out my Patreon. Otherwise, if you're one of the 78% who haven't done so yet, consider giving the channel a subscribe, it helps a lot. And if you're interested in the Gauntlet and future Gauntlet videos or participating yourself, check out the Gauntlet Discord, link below. I've heard there were some issues with the previous link expiring, so if you had trouble, give this new one a try. For today's topic, we're going to look at a very specific archetype for this optimized Bugbear. Friends of the channel, Colby at D4 and Chris with Treant Monk's Temple, have an excellent optimized range build and the very interesting spellcaster version of the build, respectively. So if you're looking for one of those versions, be sure to check them out. The other option when looking at the Bugbear tends to be the great sword wielding Stranger, the Strength Ranger. My issue with this build is that even with Gloom Stalker levels, there just isn't enough focus on dexterity or wisdom to maximize winning initiative. Eventually taking the alert feat obviously helps, but that likely comes after you've maxed strength and added the damage feat tax of Great Weapon Master. The build needs dexterity and wisdom for multiclassing and initiative and strength for attack damage. That leaves very little in the way of constitution, which is not what you want to hear when building a melee character. To that end, today we're going to build a melee and dexterity based Bugbear that has no problem winning initiative, dealing a ton of Nova damage in round 1 with the necessary movement for a non-range build to maximize the probability that they can enter melee on that first turn and have enough movement to attack multiple enemies if necessary. Any build relying on multiple attacks before enemies have a turn in combat that doesn't focus on initiative and movement may find that they can't make optimal use of their abilities because enemies either win initiative or can't be reached with a melee based attack. Because of this fact, any calculation of damage or effectiveness will oversell the strength of that particular build. So where do we begin? Well, Bugbear, of course. Very quickly, Bugbears start with 30 feet of movement speed. That's not going to cut it, especially on round 1. They also get Dark Vision, which will improve and get some additional ways to see in the dark. Fey Ancestry provides advantage on saving throws made to avoid or end the charm condition on yourself. Long Limbed adds 5 feet of reach on melee attacks on your turn. An important qualifier, those arms shrivel up after you go. Absurdities aside, this ability often gets glossed over, but has a unique benefit on a build like this where you may need to dart in and out of melee, or even give the option to attack multiple enemies without incurring opportunity attacks from the multitude of enemies with only 5 feet of reach. Powerful build to count as one size larger when determining your carrying capacity and the weight you can push, drag, or lift. Sneaky gives proficiency in the stealth skill, another oft glossed over feature because skills are easily acquired via backgrounds in 2 of the classes we're going to take on this build. But since it's a must-have skill here, it allows us to use the other skill choices to round out a character and better support the party in the areas that they're lacking. Sneak also allows the Bugbear to move through and stop in a space large enough for a small creature without squeezing. Not one size smaller, a small creature. So if you can make yourself large, this can be a really wonky ability. Finally, the ability we're building around, Surprise Attack. If you hit a creature with an attack roll, the creature takes an extra 2d6 damage if it hasn't taken a turn yet in combat. For abilities, 15s in Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom, and 8s in Strength, Intelligence, and Charisma. This isn't an insane defensive build with a super high AC and access to the shield spell, so if you're going into melee without those things, you better have a solid Constitution. We're maxing Dexterity for all the reasons Dexterity is good, and Wisdom because we're going to take Ranger levels, as you probably guessed. For your background, take whatever works for your build, party, and table. I took Acrobatics and Sleight of Hand, 2 dex-based skills of which we can take advantage. With equipment, you'll want Breastplate when you can get it, and eventually Studded Leather when your Dexterity maxes out. A Shield and Rapier will be your default setting, but you'll want a ranged weapon like a longbow or even a hand crossbow for that rare case when you have a shield equipped and can't reach any more enemies. You'll still be able to at least get off one shot. But that is a bit questionable, so ask your DM. You may also want to consider using a whip on this build. You lose 2 damage per attack landed by downgrading from a rapier to a whip, but the whip does give 5 additional feet of reach. Going from 10 to 15 probably isn't as important as going from 5 to 10, but any additional reach increases the chances that you can engage an enemy in round 1, and that is absolutely paramount to this build. If you're not going to be a ranged Bugbear and plan on using Dex instead of Strength, the whip is absolutely a viable option despite the damage increase. For the starting class, we will indeed go Ranger. Gloom Stalker is almost certainly the most optimal class for Bugbear, although plenty of other classes work very well with that racial selection. Gloom Stalker is exactly where we're headed, but first, at level 1, we get some proficiencies, 3 to be exact. I recommend Perception, Insight, and Survival, all wisdom-based skills. Tasha's also gave Rangers Deft Explorer, which gives 2 languages and effectively provides expertise in a single skill. Pick the languages you need or want, and double your proficiency in Stealth. Stealth may not help us win initiative, but it will help add massive amounts of damage to this build. At level 2, Rangers get a fighting style. Here we want Dueling, which works great with lots of attacks, and this build will have plenty in round 1. If you're unsure how this fighting style matches up against archery, have a look at my video on the topic right here. At this level, Rangers also get spellcasting. With the 2 spells, we'll take Hunter's Mark, an okay spell that usually doesn't work on Ranger builds that use their bonus action for pets or crossbows, but here, if you have one big target and can reach the enemy without issue, then dropping this spell can add significant damage in round 1 alone. We're talking about 8 attacks eventually, with potential for a 9th if one of those misses. That's up to 8d6 additional damage in 1 turn, and that doesn't include the Bugbear and Rapier damage. The second spell you'll want to take is Longstrider. It's non-concentration and adds 10 feet of movement. If you can't reach enemies, you can't deal damage. This increases movement to 40 feet. At level 3, we're finally a Gloom Stalker. That, along with Tasha's, brings some additional spells. The subclass provides Disguise Self, flavorful for a sneaky Bugbear Ranger, if not powerful. Tasha's gives Rangers Speak with Animals as a free spell known with a free casting, and at level 3, Rangers get another spell pick. Here, take Fog Cloud, a powerful level 1 spell that has multiple uses. Wolves have pack tactics. On your party, a spellcaster needs line of sight, a beholder wants to use its eye rays. Eventually, you'll even be able to use this to get advantage on attack rolls against enemies. But most importantly, at this level, we get the amazing Gloomstalker goodies. Umbral Sight extends the Bugbear's dark vision to 90 feet, but even better, this feature makes you invisible to any creature using dark vision to see you. You're going to want to be in darkness as much as possible. Concentration-free invisibility provides advantage on attacks and disadvantage when others attack you, which may be even better on a melee build like this because we need all the defense we can get. And then there's Dread Ambusher, the reason to take Gloomstalker. There really is no ability more fitting of the Bugbear. There's a reason so many Bugbear builds take the subclass. Let's recap what we wanted to do to optimize this Bugbear. 1. Win initiative. 2. Have enough movement to get to enemies on turn 1. 3. Have a ton of attacks in round 1. And 4. Do a ton of damage. Let's see what this feature gives us. First, you add your wisdom modifier to your initiative roll. Massive. We just doubled our initiative bonus from 3 to 6. That's 1 out of 4. Then it gives a plus 10 movement bonus on that first round. That's 2 out of 4. You can make 1 additional weapon attack as part of the attack action during that first round. That's 3 out of 4. And the attack does extra damage. That's 4 out of 4. It really is amazing how well these two go together. Now in turn 1, with Longstrider, your speed is 50 feet. Respectable, but not amazing. Level 4, you can certainly take an ASI and increase dexterity, which would help with attacks, damage, and winning initiative, among other things. But I really want to win initiative for the majority of this build's career. To that end, I'm taking the Alert feat. We nearly double our initiative again, this time from 6 to 11. We can't be surprised, perfectly fitting on a character like this. Due to the surprise rules, if you get surprised, you don't skip around. You still have your first round of combat, but you're unable to take actions. That means all those first round goodies are gone by the time you can actually use them. That's devastating to a build like this. We can't have that. In addition, creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls when they're unseen by us. Fog Cloud just got a lot better as a defensive tool. Level 5 brings extra attack, which of course is huge on a build that needs a lot of attacks, and perhaps more importantly, second level spells. Tasha's provides the free use of Beast Sense. Gloomstalker adds the phenomenal Rope Trick spell. Check out Bill Braun's video on that spell, fantastic. It's basically broken, and you get to take another second level spell, so why not take another potentially busted spell and pass without a trace? With your stealth, this build will eventually have a plus 17. At this point, it will be a plus 9. Adding another plus 10 to that for up to an hour means you will effectively be able to hide and sneak up on every enemy you face. A surprise round isn't necessary at this point, but it's always powerful, and it will get exponentially more powerful to kick off tier 3. At this point, you should probably switch out Hunter's Mark for a second spell at this level. Summon Beast can be a nice addition if you want to dish out more damage. Some optimizers argue that the spell is bad. It's not. But it's also not as good as Spike Growth, which can help to control battlefields, set up great combos with your table mates, and has potential to deal a ton of damage, especially if the enemies have no way to fly or teleport out of the thorns. Eventually here, I do end up taking Hunter's Mark again, but it would be completely reasonable to add another higher level spell with that pick. In fact, I almost certainly would, if I was playing this in campaign. Rangers don't get much at level 6, so I think it's time to switch up and head for Fighter, of course. The big additions at level 1 and 2 are a second fighting style. Defense is a completely respectable choice, as is superior technique if you really want to ensure you never lose initiative. Ambush would allow for an additional d6 to your initiative or stealth, but blind fighting is the grab here. If you're in darkness, Umbral Sight makes you invisible to enemies that use dark vision. Advantage on attacks and disadvantage on their attacks against you. If you're not in darkness, your Fog Cloud or another spellcaster's darkness spell can serve as a means to get you advantage now, along with the defensive benefits we've covered. Second Wind is a fine addition, but Action Surge at level 2 is why we're here. We want a lot of round 1 attacks, and this gives us just that. The fact that Dread Ambusher's extra attack also doubles, along with your actual extra attack, is just the icing on the delicious multi-attack cake. At Fighter 3 level 8, we pick the Martial archetype, and there is an argument to go Battlemaster for those maneuvers we missed out on by picking blind fighting, specifically ambush and even precision attack. But we want more melee attacks, and the best subclass for that is also the most powerful fighter subclass, the Echo Knight. Manifest Echo lets you do some really fun, creative, and powerful things. That bonus action that we didn't clog with Crossbow Expert or 2-weapon fighting can now be used to create the Echo within 15 feet. But realistically, it should be created before the combat starts. It can then move 30 feet with no action cost. And this is the big one. In any direction. That means up. This should help deal with flying enemies when you're unable to make ranged weapons work. Then, as a bonus action, you can teleport yourself into the Echo spot. The only cost is 15 feet of movement. In round 1, you should have up to 50 feet of movement. This can potentially provide another 15 feet on top of that. You can also choose not to teleport and simply make your attack actions through the Echo. If you're facing hordes of enemies, this can prove useful in making sure that you can spread out and hit as many as possible. And finally, you can make opportunity attacks as normal, or through the Echo space. This doubles your chances to get those attacks, which are great if you have an ability like, sneak attack. On top of this great ability, Echo Knights get Unleash Incarnation, which provides one additional melee attack, and this is an important reason why we're not a ranged combatant, per attack action. If we happen to action surge, like say on round 1, this can also be doubled since we're taking a second attack action. That means at level 8, this build is getting 8 total attacks on round 1 with potentially 65 feet of effective movement. Plus 11 to initiative to help ensure you get 2d6 on all of those attacks, along with another 1d8 on 2 of them. At this point, we're going to multi-class again, this time, as you may have guessed, Rogue. No huge surprises on this build. We get another proficiency, and here I take Athletics, being a melee build that also sneaks or potentially scouts ahead. Athletics checks may come up, and you don't want to be completely ineffective in this area. If you want to go more of the social route, then taking one of those skills makes sense. We also get Expertise in 2 skills. Perception is a must, and I also like Insight, another useful wisdom-based skill. At this level, rogues also get Sneak Attack, which does add some nice damage, and can even be procured on off-turn opportunity attacks if the requirements are met. At Rogue 2, character level 10, you get Cunning Action, and this is once again a huge feature on this build. Bonus action hides are useful on any build that has access to forms of invisibility, but can also realistically be used mid-combat without wasting entire turns via an action spend. Disengaging as a bonus action may be essential if you're running from enemy to enemy to get off a lot of attacks. It's generally more effective to focus fire, but the need to move out of melee will likely come up at some point during an adventure. Finally, and most importantly, Cunning Action allows for the dash action to be taken as a bonus action. What does a dash action do? Double movement speed. Turn 1 with Long Strider, that's 100 feet of movement. It's unlikely you'll need any more than that, but if you do, for instance in difficult terrain, you have your Echo teleport to add to the maneuverability of the build. And then at Rogue 3 level 11, entering into tier 3, we're going to go with the roguish archetype Assassin. Nothing fancy here. If an enemy hasn't had a turn in combat, we now have advantage. That means anytime the 2d6 Bugbear ability goes off, so does advantage. And if the creature is surprised, that hit is an auto-critical. How likely is surprise? Well, it depends on your DM, but with a stealth bonus of plus 11 that will max out at plus 17, and with Pass Without a Trace to bring that to plus 27 and support all of your ally stealth checks, surprise with this build is about as realistic an option as you'll get in this game. Here we're going to take another level of Rogue for the ASI to bump Dexterity, since it's level 12 and this build only has 1 feat and no ASI. This helps initiative, attacks, damage, stealth checks, and armor class. Dexterity is fantastic. Now it's time to dive back into Ranger. Ranger 6 adds 5 more feet of movement via Deft Explorer's roving feature. A swim speed and a climbing speed is also nice for those pesky gauntlet-based underwater encounters. Ranger 7 gives the fantastic Gloom Stalker ability Iron Mind for proficiency in the ever-important wisdom saving throws. With the additional spell known, I'm going to re-grab Hunter's Mark, but feel free to take a more powerful second level spell. 8 is a great concentration free option. Ranger 8 gives Landstride and another ASI. We're going to max dexterity here, so be sure to switch to Studded Leather to make use of that high dex mod. Ranger 9, level 16, gives 3rd level spells. Conjure Animals, blah blah blah. Here is the sage advice ruling on the spell. If you run the spell by the official D&D rulings, it's far less reliable than the I cast raptors every single time crowd says. Maybe one day I'll do a video on this, I don't know. Anyway, here there are a lot of good options. Chardalon's Stride, another bonus action spell, adds 20 feet of movement and an extra 1d6 damage when you get within 5 feet of an enemy. I'd probably take that primarily for the movement boost, but this build isn't getting within 5 feet of most enemies, so... Revivify is also a strong pick. Summon Fae would probably be my in-campaign choice to add some action economy free damage, but for the purposes of this build and our goal of doing as much damage on those weapon attacks as possible, I'm going with Elemental Weapon. Another +1 to hit and 1d4 on damage rolls for an hour is a decent if not spectacular choice here. At this level, Rangers also get the free casting of Speak with Plants, and Gloom Stalkers get the excellent Fear spell. Cone spells like Fear tend to work better on builds that aren't afraid to get into that melee mix, which fits well on this build as opposed to the standard ranged Gloom Stalker. Level 17 brings Nature's Veil, another bonus action ability. This one allows you to become invisible for a turn. Hey, if you're not in darkness, this can be real handy. And then our final level in Ranger, Stalker's Flurry at 11 allows us to make another attack when we miss on a weapon attack. This isn't as good as a 3rd attack, but it's a pretty decent proxy. With advantage and maxed out dexterity, how often will this build miss attacks? Well, depends on how often you make attacks. Missing once will be unlikely, but over the course of 8 attacks, rolling a 1 for an auto miss becomes far more likely. And missing the average AC of a tier 4 creature, 19, is even more common. In fact, the chance to miss that 19 AC creature at least once with 8 attacks, even with advantage, is still 53%. That means just over half of turn 1s for this build will result in a missed attack that you can then just make another attack. Plenty of those misses will be nat 1s that can't be improved with bonus rolls. You can have a +100, but a nat 1 is a nat 1. You miss. Another attack roll is exactly what you need. Level 19 will grab a level in Fighter for the SI. There are arguments to be made for taking Skulker here to hide in Light Obscurement, so you'd be able to hide in both Heavy and Light Obscurement. If that's not a thing at your table due to the reading of the rules, Fey Touched would be a strong option. Teleportation is great in those cases where your Echo is dead, or you don't have the movement available to use it. And of course, this gives access to Gift of Alacrity to make sure an initiative roll loss is all but impossible. You'd have to forego an earlier feat to make sure you can bump Wisdom with another half feat, which doesn't quite fit for me, so I'm going with Lucky, which is incredibly strong on this build, even this late. This shores up saving throws, makes sure important attacks that miss can be re-rolled, and allows for a re-roll of initiative. For the final level, all the way at 20, finish off with the final rogue level. Uncanny Dodge is nice, but nothing spectacular, even though it may save some pretty decent damage at this level. And Sneak Attack increases to 3d6, which can be made with those opportunity attacks from both your spot and your Echo's location. So what kind of damage is this build looking at? Let's assume we cast Longstrider for the extra movement in case we need it. We'll forego a Pass Without a Trace because that +17 stealth will get the job done. I'll calculate when surprise happens and doesn't so we can see both. With a +13 to initiative and lucky, I'm going to assume we win initiative to trigger the Bugbear surprise attack feature for 2d6 damage and the Assassin's assassinate feature for auto advantage. With advantage, Sneak Attack will always land on the first hit. That's another 3d6 damage, and I'm going to pre-cast Elemental Weapon for a +1 attack and the 1d4 damage. Dread Ambusher gives the additional attacks and the 1d8 on that attack. With the bonus to hit, the chance of at least one miss dips to 47%. With 21 average damage per hit, excluding the sneak attack damage and Dread Ambusher bump, Stalker's Flurry will add only 9.875 damage in this turn 1 Nova round. That will be added onto the 185.389 damage that the 8 attacks will do on average, for a total of 195.264 damage. Here's the thing, Hunter's Mark will actually do about 2 points more DPR than Elemental Weapon, but that's assuming a single target, because you'd have to move it back and forth from different targets if you kill one, which we're not assuming with Elemental Weapon. So if you have one big bad that you need to kill, then Hunter's Mark is the better option, given that it's only a first level slot instead of a third. Now, what happens in the likely situation you surprise your enemies? Well, you're going to deal 310.25 damage, on average. What are you going to do after that? Well, about 41 DPR, so don't hesitate to use your spells at this point. If you liked the video, please like the video, subscribe, comment, share, the YouTube things. Join the Gauntlet Discord if you want to test out your own builds. Thanks, folks. See you here next time. Hey there, everybody. I wanted to quickly give a shout out to Weirdworks and their Eldritch Overlord Fantasy Cyberpunk Tarot set, featured on Kickstarter right now. I'm not being paid to say this, I just think it's really cool and I really like the creators, and it's always a great idea to support third-party creators that are good people and make good products. So if you think this looks as awesome as I do, check out their Kickstarter and get yourself some of these awesome cards like I do right now.